At some point in life, many people have a painful realization. They look back at past relationships, past choices, past situations, and they ask themselves a difficult question. Why did I stay in places where I was not fully valued? Why did I accept less than what I truly needed? Why did I tolerate behavior that I would never allow today? For many people, this realization brings shame or self-criticism. They think they should have known better. They think they were weak, naive, or not strong enough to walk away. But the truth is usually much more compassionate than that. Most people who once settled for less did not do so because they lacked strength. They did so because parts of them were still trying to survive emotionally. Those parts were shaped long before the relationship ever began. When we talk about healing, we often focus on changing external circumstances, leaving unhealthy relationships, setting boundaries, choosing different partners. But deeper healing involves something more internal. It involves healing the parts of you that once believed that settling for less was the only way to keep connection. Those parts often formed early in life. As children, we learn what love looks like through the emotional environment around us. If care was consistent, emotionally responsive, and safe, the nervous system learns that love is stable. It learns that needs can be expressed without losing connection. But when love is inconsistent, emotionally distant, critical, or unpredictable, a different lesson can form. A child learns that connection may require adaptation. They learn to become quieter, more accommodating, more patient, more understanding than they should have to be. They may learn to tolerate emotional distance because they are afraid that asking for more will lead to rejection. They may learn to earn love instead of expecting it naturally. None of these adaptations are weaknesses. They are survival strategies. They helped you stay connected in environments where emotional security was not guaranteed. But the strategies that protect us in childhood can later become patterns that limit us in adulthood. If you learned that love requires patience without reciprocity, you may tolerate relationships where your needs are repeatedly overlooked. If you learned that expressing needs leads to conflict or rejection, you may silence yourself to preserve harmony. If you learned that affection appears unpredictably, you may confuse emotional inconsistency with passion or chemistry. Over time, these patterns can lead people into relationships where they settle for less than they truly deserve, not because they lack awareness or intelligence, but because their nervous system is still operating on old emotional maps. Healing begins when you start recognizing those patterns without judgment. Instead of asking, "Why did I allow that?" you begin asking a different question. What part of me believed that was the best I could have at the time? This shift from blame to curiosity is powerful, because once you understand that your past choices came from adaptive parts of yourself, you can begin to heal those parts instead of rejecting them. One of the most important parts to heal is the part that equates love with effort. Many people who settled for less believed that if they just tried harder, loved deeper, or remained patient long enough, the relationship would eventually become fulfilling. They believed that love was something you earned through endurance. But real love is not built on endurance alone. Healthy relationships involve effort from both people. They involve emotional presence, mutual care, and a willingness to grow together. When one person is consistently giving more, tolerating more, and hoping more than the other, the relationship becomes unbalanced. Healing means learning that love does not require you to abandon your own needs. Another part that often needs healing is the part that fears abandonment. For people who experienced emotional inconsistency early in life, the fear of losing connection can be powerful. This fear can make people stay longer than they should in relationships that are not healthy. They may tolerate disrespect, emotional distance, or repeated disappointment because leaving feels even more frightening. It can feel safer to stay in a painful but familiar dynamic than to face the uncertainty of walking away. Healing this part involves slowly teaching your nervous system that connection does not have to come at the cost of your well-being. That leaving unhealthy environments does not mean you will always be alone. That your worth is not determined by whether someone chooses you. Another important part to heal is the part that minimizes your own needs. Many people who settled for less learned early in life that their emotional needs were too much or inconvenient, so they became skilled at asking for very little. They accepted partial attention instead of full presence. They accepted occasional affection instead of consistent care. They told themselves that maybe they were expecting too much. Healing means recognizing that your emotional needs are not excessive. They are human. Wanting consistency, respect, honesty, and emotional availability is not asking for perfection. It is asking for the foundation of a healthy relationship. As you begin healing these parts of yourself, something important starts to change. Your tolerance for unhealthy dynamics decreases. The behaviors you once explained away begin to stand out more clearly. You no longer feel compelled to stay in situations where you must constantly question your value or fight for emotional space. Instead of asking whether someone will finally choose you, you begin asking whether the relationship itself aligns with your well-being. This shift transforms the way you approach connection. You start prioritizing emotional safety instead of emotional intensity. You become more attentive to patterns of behavior rather than isolated moments of affection. You begin to trust consistency more than promises. And perhaps most importantly, you start choosing yourself. Choosing yourself does not mean rejecting love. It means refusing to abandon your needs in order to keep it. It means recognizing that your peace, your emotional safety, and your sense of self are not things that should be negotiated away. Healing the parts of you that once settled for less is not about judging your past. Your past self did the best they could with the awareness and emotional tools they had at the time. Those experiences taught you important lessons. They revealed what happens when your needs are ignored. They showed you the cost of staying in situations that require constant compromise of your emotional well-being. And those lessons become powerful guides for the future. As healing progresses, the version of you that once accepted less begins to transform. The part that feared asking for more becomes more confident. The part that waited for others to validate your worth becomes more grounded internally. The part that once believed love had to be difficult begins to recognize that healthy love feels very different. It feels steady. It feels respectful. It feels safe to express yourself. It feels like two people choosing each other consistently, rather than one person trying to hold the relationship together alone. This transformation does not happen overnight. Healing old patterns requires patience and self-compassion. There may still be moments when old fears or habits appear. But each time you notice those patterns and respond differently, you strengthen a new internal foundation. A foundation where love no longer requires you to shrink, silence yourself, or settle. A foundation where relationships are built on mutual respect, emotional presence, and shared effort. And as you continue healing, something surprising happens. The kind of people you feel drawn to begins to change. The connections that once felt irresistible but chaotic lose their appeal. Instead, you become more attracted to people who show up with consistency, integrity, and emotional openness. This shift is not a coincidence. When you heal the parts of you that once settled for less, you begin creating space for relationships that offer more. More respect, more presence, more genuine connection. And perhaps the most important realization of all is this. The goal of healing is not to become perfect or never make mistakes again. The goal is to develop enough self-awareness and self-respect that you no longer stay in places where your value is constantly questioned. Because once you truly understand your worth, settling for less no longer feels like an option. It simply feels like something that belonged to an earlier version of you, a version that was still learning, and that version deserves compassion, because it carried you to the point where you are now, a point where you are finally ready to heal,